Hi, this is Daniela Wolf with Bestie Life, the podcast, and this is your community to support you through the little and not so little events that make up your day-to-day life. From the I've got this moments to the I just can't moments. We are here to empower all women to find and develop the skills they need to find peace, balance, and the bliss in their busy. Through solo episodes as well as interviews with amazing women who share their journey and their story and how it works for you. I hope you find the inspirations to make you laugh, think, as well as maybe rethink what you thought you knew, and connect as we realize that we are all living similar ups and downs and don't have to do it alone. So excited for you to hear this episode, and thanks so much for joining me today. Hi, this is Daniela with Bestie Life, the podcast, and today I am so excited for you to meet Dominika Staniewicz. She is your brain coach and is one of the few elite neuroencoding specialists in the world with a holistic life coaching qualification. She's also a licensed brain coach by Dr. Amen, a renowned neuropsychiatrist. Her coaching approach is super unique. I can't wait for you to hear about it because she blends scientific knowledge about the brain with the emotional support of a life coach. And she uses a variety of techniques such as neurocoding and EMDR to really help her clients reprogram their brains and create new neural pathways, enabling them to achieve their desired lives. So thank you so much, Dominika, for joining us today.
I am so excited to join you. Thank you for having me.
I am so excited. I've heard a little bit when we pre-chatted, but I want my listeners to really hear how you got into this field because it's fascinating and it's just so unique. I can't wait for you to share your story.
Well, the story is actually quite long, so we're going to make it short because you guys don't have 5-6 hours. I was going through life and I was extremely successful when I lived in Europe. I was working for the government and I was an outside expert, doing data analysis and prognosis on labor market, on media, and, being everywhere. I was also a coach for six-figure income earners when they were changing their career. And I was so freaking miserable. I was so miserable. I would come home every day and cry. I got divorced. I was mom of twins alone, and outside everybody thought, wow, you're so amazing. And then inside it was just crumbling down. It was extremely lonely and scary. And I was surrounded by men in their 50s and 60s whose mindset was, well, from the 50s and 60s when it comes to women. And I was 24 at that time, 25, 26. So I was very young. And then life happened. I lost my son, and then my girls came, and I got divorced, and a lot of things were happening along the way. And then one day I woke up and I'm like, this cannot be life. This just cannot be it. I'm also a person who has epilepsy. So I was always confused with being a drug addict on a regular basis because a seizure looks like you overdosed. And the only thing people see on TV is people overdosing, and that's how it looks. So going through life, being told that, you're pretty, but you cannot really get a degree, maybe, you're disabled, you're epileptic, people like you are not intelligent, your brain is not right. So when I started working on me, I worked with different coaches and psychiatrists and psychologists, and I was improving, but I loved coaching. I like the idea of being here and now and not really, putting apart the past, just taking what I have now and how can I make it better? Just looking for an action plan of change. And, I went to Tony Robbins and one event, second event, I crewed his event, I hired a coach again. I worked. And then one day, just one day, Joseph McClendon III, who is a head coach for Tony Robbins, and he trains his trainers, and Dr. Amen, who's a neuropsychiatrist, and he's a world-class neuropsychiatrist working with all the NFL players in the US because of the brain trauma they're experiencing while playing NFL. They created a brain revolution. They were hoping to stay together, where neuropsychology met neuroscience and neuropsychiatry and the biological knowledge of the brain and how it functions. And I fell in love because my degree is in science. I have MS in sociology. I love patterns. I love things that are predictable. I've been fascinated by my whole life how a pattern can influence your life in a bigger scale when it comes to human behavior and now into individual. And I got so many insights with those two gentlemen that still train me till this day. And 3 years later, I have trainings every week that are upgrading my knowledge. And then Dr. Huberman from, Stanford, who is a neuroscientist, all of that knowledge put together, it just blew my mind how much we know now about the brain, how over medicated we are, how medicine is important in certain situations because natural remedies and certain neurotransmitters that we need or certain things that happen in our brain should not be treated without medication. But there's also a lot of things we can do without medication, like depression, anxiety, PTSD, getting stuck, overwhelm, all of those things right now. And ADHD, which is, by the way, very often I want to say overprescribed because that's the wrong word, but overdiagnosed. We don't need to meet a lot of criteria, and we self-diagnose very often when we decide. Very often it's just lack of skills or your brain is wired in a different way, and it's possible to rewire. Not to say that ADHD doesn't exist. It does. It's just not 15-20% of population. It's about 5% of population. That's the only difference. So, all the knowledge that I've gained, and I started practicing with my clients, and it turned out that we got phenomenal results within 3 to 6 months, and there was no need for medication. Only one person I had to transfer to a psychiatrist where they needed to go on medication because the progress was too slow, and we wanted them to get better way sooner. It's looking at your blood work, understanding that your gut is producing neurotransmitters, and taking anxiety, social anxiety of one of my clients that was about to be put on medication at the age of 32. She would go to a public place and she would either throw up or faint. I mean, really, at 32, you can't live like that. How are you going to meet people? How are you going to go out? And within 3 months, we got her to a point where she said, "Hey, Dominika, I was in a room and I didn't faint. And I
That's
was
awesome.
okay." I'm like, "Oh my God, that's fantastic." We celebrated. And then a few weeks later, I got Dominika. I spoke with 5 people. It was amazing. No medication was needed, but we did do the work, and she did a lot of work with my guidance and, with taking into account what brain type she has. Because very often, see, the thing is that our brains do their thing. They optimize everything, and we are not aware of this. This is not something we can control at the beginning, but what we can do, we can recognize that it did it and then go, is that reaction serving me? Is that behavior serving me? Is that thought process is serving me? And I heard one of the coaches give this beautiful analogy for our brain, which I use a little bit different one, but I like her better. I don't remember her name. She said that when I say our brain lies to you, we all thought, "I'm going to kill him. I hate them." And we all have those thoughts. It's just we don't act on them. And she compared this to, malfunctioning code of programming in your computer. And those thoughts are just malfunctioning codes. And obviously, if you act on them, the computer is going to get stuck. And then you have, your cerebellum or anterior cingulate getting stuck, and then you cannot move on. So anyway, that's my story. And I would love to serve you guys and give you some tips how you can optimize your brain so your life is better and happier. And we all can have a phenomenal life if we choose to.
So I love all of that, because I think so many times people don't recognize the ingrained science behind so many, common types of things. And just even recognizing a lot of what happens in our bodies, our physiological reactions, the way we think, these are programmed from the days of when we were, fight or flights coming from running from lions, not I have to stand up on a stage and speak to people, and, being able to kind of rethink and reprogram the way that we're going to respond to it, or recognize, a physiological response isn't always negative, is so powerful. That then being able to go in a room, take action, lead that board meeting, or run your business, or do all those types of different things. So what are some of the areas that you kind of commonly see or start with when you're working with somebody?
So first thing we do, we always run blood work. I need to see that your D3, magnesium, potassium, ferritin, iron, and a few other things are at the optimum levels. That's very important because it can be in the norm, but it's not serving your brain. If it's, let's say, D3, which is actually a hormone, not a vitamin, but we call it a vitamin for some unknown reason. If D3 is, let's say, between 30 and 40, it is still in the norm, but it's not enough to work well for your brain, to be a neurotransmitter and support your brain in creating the right neural pathways and creating the right responses. So Dr. Amen recommends that's between, you know, at least 60 to 75, even 80. So those are things you can do on your own. What we do, and obviously if there's something seriously wrong, I will, you know, refer you to a doctor. A few times we caught, for example, there was a big disproportion and inflammation markers. And I'm like, are you sick? Is there anything wrong? Because why? Because if your gut is inflamed, it's not producing the neurotransmitters, they're not getting to your brain, and you feel down, you feel stressed. And all of those things, not to say that this is the only cause, but that's one of the things to eliminate. Your body is connected to your brain. Your brain takes 20% of your energy. So we check that. Then we check your brain type, and we look for what you're predisposed based on assessments from Dr. Amen. And some brains are predisposed to worry. Some brains are predisposed to look for adrenaline rush. And because you're predisposed, your brain will always prove you right. And that's a very simple way of saying. So whatever you crave, your brain will find proof. If you, for example, believe that all men or all women are mean and wrong and cruel, your brain will seek out examples from your life, which there are examples like that, and go, see, you're right. And this will reaffirm your certain belief that will create a chemical reaction in your brain, or your brain will inform other parts of your body to release certain chemicals, and you will feel a certain way. Your feelings are chemicals that are automatic reactions. Now, word automatic is a clue. If we recognize those things, we can change them. And the funny thing is that it takes practice. So those things didn't happen when you were aware. They did. It's up to age of 7, 8 where your belief systems are formed. And then your brain looks for proof to prove you right. So what we need to do, we need to dismantle. And that's the first thing we do. We dismantle the craziest beliefs people have, like, I'm stupid. That's interesting. So what our brain does is, because it's easier to manage and optimize everything and make it a habit, a reaction, an automatic way we behave, your brain doesn't have to analyze anything and can, you know, take information from the environment, process the 1.6 billion information that we take in with smells, sounds, and everything else that's happening around us. So it doesn't, you know, really care about that. It has to run your organs, right? Your heart and everything else. But the problem with that is that it optimizes everything, even things you don't want to optimize. And it conserves energy like this because it is in the limbic system that in case something happens, it needs to have energy to save you, right? Well, there's nothing. I mean, there are no lions chasing us, as you've noticed. And the only fear that's induced is usually by media, social media, and TV. Mind you, I don't own a TV for the last 20 years. I don't have a need to own a TV or watch the news. I do read the news, which is less emotionally targeting, because it's just information without the pictures, the sounds, the intonation. And I do want to know what's happening in the world. So there are ways to prevent your brain from doing things that it's doing. And the moment you recognize, that's when we start working with those things. But your body and your brain and your gut need to be in a good state. So I don't know if you know, but for example, for depression and anxiety in Europe, a prescription is to go to walk in a park for 20 minutes a day. It's a prescription. And that's where you start with breathing exercises and walking in the park. Why? Because it calms down our nervous system. If you have anxiety, please go on a swing for 15 minutes a day and swing. Notice what happens with kids when they're anxious and stressed. They start swinging. When a kid is, catatonic state where there's high overwhelm of stress, we start swinging. Elderly people, to calm down their nervous system, what do? They go on rocking chairs. It is something that it's already programmed in and we can use to our advantage. But it's just, of course, it's not going to fix everything, but it's going to improve and it can help your nervous system.
Right. And this absolutely doesn't replace, medical advice if someone's
Absolutely.
at risk emotionally, their mental health, this is not to replace that in any way. But I do like the concept, and I preach it as well, that, the way you think affects the way you feel. And when you feel differently, you act differently. And so you can't start with just those actions. You do have to look at the thoughts behind it in order to kind of work through that whole system. So it is all connected in so many ways. So when people come to work with you, are they typically, is this from a business standpoint or simply an emotional standpoint? Like, what kind of person do you think this is for?
Well, every person who has a brain,
Okay.
because we're treating an organ. So it's more approaching from your emotions are the result of how your organ works.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we're looking at, the neural pathways that you have created. Um, you know, the blood work. Obviously, if you're schizophrenic, if you have bipolar disorder, certain disorders that come from psychiatric world, there are only psychiatric, experts that can work with you, psychiatrists.
Absolutely. That chemical imbalance is not something we can just
No,
undo.
no, no, this is not something a brain coach can do. But
Mm-hmm.
if you have anxiety, if you have fear of failure, self-doubt, self-loathing, you get stuck, which is, your anterior cingulate, it's your gear shifter.
Mm-hmm.
And there are ways we can activate that. There are ways to get more blood running to your brain. There are ways to get more nutrients into your brain. There are ways we can activate the brain with the connection of the body with even with what you eat. And there are phenomenal psychiatrists right now who are promoting even changing your diet to feel better. When you go outside is important, your life habits, your stressors, and also your past traumas. And I'm going to make very clear that we all have experiences. Not all of them actually qualify as trauma. Some of them are just bad experiences. When we mean trauma, I mean the ones that change your brain, that were really, really impactful. The fact that your mom yelled at you, it was very unpleasant, but I don't know, unless she beat you and, put you in a cellar, that wouldn't be trauma. That would be just very uncomfortable and something that's residually coming up in your life. Getting rid of those with some protocols and with some EMDR work or other ways is extremely important, because at the end of the day, it is our responsibility, and our parents did the best they could with the knowledge they have, and they probably repeated what was done to them. They have no idea that they're hurting us or that this wouldn't work. Most of the time, most people want to do good and they have no clue how to do any other way. And it's important to remember that this realm of education, what we now know about the brain and personal development and psychology, neuroplasticity, all of those things, this is the last 15 years. Our
Yeah.
parents had no clue. So give them some grace, forgive them, and take responsibility that, whatever is implemented in you is there. It's your time to change.
Right. I know you said this is kind of a practice. These are things you need to do on a regular basis. Are there certain things that you still continue to practice and do on a regular basis to help yourself?
Oh, absolutely. I have my morning rituals that
Mm-hmm.
I do, and I do gratitude every day in the morning and the evening. And the way I do gratitude is not only that it has to be something I'm grateful for that I have noticed during the day. So, for example, somebody held the door for me or somebody smiled at me. So, those are things that are not repetitive. Second of all, I get myself to a state where I actually feel it, to a point where either my mouth is smiling like crazy or I even have tears coming down. I evoke that emotional feeling of gratitude because there's quite a few brain scans and studies done on gratitude, how it changes and rewires your brain. Now, granted, rewiring per se and neuroplasticity happens when you're asleep, or if you're in deep rest. It does not happen when the event happens after the age of 25. Next, I give myself high five in a mirror and I tell myself, I love you, Dominika. You're amazing. And I smile to myself to the mirror. I also celebrate little tiny things because scientifically, and a lot of studies have proven that if you concentrate on the outcome, you're less successful and your life is less joyful. And you actually see less opportunities because of the high stress and levels of cortisol in your body. There's nothing wrong with cortisol. It's a problem when it's constant.
Mm-hmm.
Cortisol is absolutely necessary. It's a good thing. We want cortisol, right? Because if we see that maybe lion one day, we want that cortisol to kick in and for us to run and adrenaline to start running. So those are the things I do on daily basis. I do the gratitude. I do walks 3, 4 times a week. And outside world, I do try as soon as the sun comes out. During the summer, I go outside for 20 minutes and I try to stay outside. I do exercise daily, 15 minutes, nothing
Mhm.
over the top, just to get the body going. So these are my habits. I read my
Yeah.
Bibles every day and I make sure that, my curiosity comes before my judgment. Everybody judges, just to be very clear. We all judge. It's absolute BS what psychologists and pseudo psychologists are saying, don't judge. We all judge. We all judge because that's the way of categorizing things. And that's how we have to function. That's how our brain is created. But before we go into judgment, we can be curious because
Mhm.
it allows us to be more open. And that's a very different approach. Because at one point, we need to have a category where to put something, how it functions, so we can understand better and we can make sense of the world and our brain doesn't get overwhelmed.
Mhm.
So those are the basic things I do.
No, I love that you shared that because those are so much more tangible. A lot of times people might hear the terms like rewiring, neurocoding, things like that. When I talk about rewiring your brain, I look at it like it's a path in the woods and there's a well-worn path that has been traveled on for years. And so it's easy to follow. And rewiring your brain is just creating a new path, which is why it takes that repetition, going over it and over it to be able to create a new, easy to follow path for your thoughts and for the way that you're thinking about situations and things like that. But I love how like just actionable and practical, when you really break it down, those steps are, because it can sound too technical, sciencey, but these are just day-to-day habits. Like you said, things you can do in small bursts of time without a lot of money, right outside your door, right inside on your couch on a day-to-day basis. So I love all of that.
I got my brain to a point being epileptic that in 7 years I had no seizures. And the
Congratulations. That's
seizures were
fantastic.
stress induced. And I really like what you said about the analogy of the path in the forest. So when we create that new path, the old path is going to always be there, but
Mhm.
it's going to be less visible with the bushes. And
Exactly.
one thing you got to remember, even when you change your neural pathways, behaviors, habits, and everything else that comes with it, if you're in a high stress situation, the primal instincts will kick in and will bring out the old behaviors. The beautiful thing about it is that you have now a new default behavior, so you can stop yourself and move back to the new path. And that's a tool, that's an ability, that's something you train. It's like with walking. You got to first stand up to even run or to
Mhm.
walk. You cannot run a marathon if you're still sitting down and not able to take a first step. And that's exactly the same thing with your brain. And the beauty about it is that it's not a death sentence. Our
Mhm.
brain can do so many things. And one little tip, if you have any listeners that are bilingual and bicultural, I'm going to give you a tip that people pay me thousands of dollars to know. If you ever do personal development, and if you're bilingual, bicultural, do it in a first language that you use up to the age of 7. Do
Okay.
not do it in English. First, do it in your first language, then do it in English. It
Mhm.
will have profound and very different effect because your emotions are tied to the language you used by the age of 7 and your chemical reactions. And what it is after 7, when you learned a new language, like I did, this is not my first language, it creates an overlap in your brain for a new language. And this is still untouched. And what I found is when I went back to my home country, to Poland, all
Mhm.
my old behaviors came out. And I'm like, where did they come from? How is that happening? I've worked through all this. I don't have that when I use English. I'm like, oh my God, I forgot what I was taught long time ago. And I had to redo all my trainings and all my priming and all the things that I did in my own language. So the triggers would not be there and they would be dissolved in my native language.
Wow, that's fascinating, but it totally makes sense when you explain it because definitely you're processing. So my parents are from Sicily, and growing up, my dad, speak English, all those kind of things. Whenever he did math, you could hear him. He was doing all the numbers still in Sicilian, because you do revert back to that's when he learned math. That's when he learned adding, subtracting, and so that does stick with you. But like hearing you explain it, just definitely is eye-opening for me because it definitely makes sense. So where can people find you, Dominika? How can they work with you?
Well, I always invite you to my page, which is yourbraincoachd.com. You can find me on Instagram and on Facebook, yourbraincoachd.com. And you can also go to Amazon and put in Dominika Staniewicz and find a book that just came out, which is called The Magic of Dreaming Big, Acting Small, and Achieving Success. It's for all of those people who want to be happier with less stress and no overwhelm. It is a different approach to life that you can practice and really change your life for the better and rewire your brain without necessarily hiring a coach. Although I do recommend always having somebody to support you. I have 2 coaches, and I absolutely love going further and faster, and it makes life easier. So those are the 3 ways. So you can find me on Instagram, Facebook, and my website. All of them are yourbraincoachd. Your Brain Coach D on Facebook and Instagram, and of course the book.
And those links will be live in the show notes as well, so they can definitely find them here, as well as that book. It sounds like a great place to start if you were listening to this and thinking, I want to find out some more information. That sounds like a great way to just kind of dip your toe in a little bit more and get some more information. So thank you so much, Dominika, for joining us today.
It was an absolute pleasure. I hope you guys got a lot of value, and I'm happy to hear from you if you have any questions.
Thanks so much again for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Please let me know any questions or comments that you have. Also, if you can please leave an Apple 5-star review so that this episode can be shared with more women. There's 2 quotes that I love. Alone we may be strong, but together we are stronger, as well as when women support each other, incredible things happen. So let's be stronger and incredible together, as well as maybe just have some fun along the way. Thanks so much and talk to you soon. Bye.